Paris is on lockdown. The French capital is witnessing the fourth weekend of anti-government protests. Paris riot police clashed near the famous Champs Elysees boulevard with protesters. Police fired tear gas in a bid to push back. Hundreds of protesters gathered around the shopping boulevard and the Arc de Triomphe monument. Police estimate that around 1,500 protesters had gathered in the area. About 8,000 police were deployed in Paris alone to avoid a repeat of last Saturday, mayhem. Across France, around 89,000 police personnel have been deployed. Police say that there were 211 people who had been arrested after police found weapons such as hammers, baseball bats and metal pétanque balls on them. French police used batons as they arrested a yellow vest protester in central Paris. Hundreds of protesters were milling around the Arc de Triomphe monument, which was defaced with graffiti last Saturday when rioters also torched cars and looted shops. Yellow vest protesters carried banners and gathered in central Paris against President Macron. More than 130 people have been injured in the protests so far. This is the worst street violence the country has seen in decades. French President Macron is expected to make a statement about the protests next week. Landmarks like the Eiffel Tower, Arc de Triomphe, Élysée Palace, Sainte-Chapelle have been closed in Paris, along with operas, theatres, libraries and major department stores as well. Music concerts and football matches have also been cancelled in view of the planned protests. Tourists and citizens have been instructed to remain indoors, keeping in view of the precarious situation that could possibly result in destruction and violence. The US, Belgium, Portugal and the Czech Republic have advised their citizens to avoid or postpone trips to Paris. Scores of high school students too have been rounded up as a precautionary measure ahead of the protests. Remember, students and farmers too have joined in. Protesting youth have indulged in arson and rioting in the city in the previous rounds. However, these images of students kneeling with their hands behind their backs has sparked outrage on social media. The protests come even as the government has considered ground and withdrawn police the fuel price hikes. However, what began as a protest against a hike in fuel taxes spiraled into large-scale demonstrations, with protesters demanding the easing of the budgets of hard-pressed households and an increase in the minimum wage. We have Elena Casas Montanez, World is One correspondent, joining us live from Paris for the latest on the ground situation over there. Elena, thank you so much for taking time out. Talk to us, how exactly is Paris holding up at this point in time? Elena, if you can hear us.
Well, as you can see, there are groups of yellow vests gathered behind me here in central Paris, thus far relatively calmly. We are hearing on the Champs Elysees, which was of course the scene of the worst violences last week. There was tear gas shot and rubber bullets earlier today. And so there have been some minor public order problems, but what we're really seeing here is an enormous change in tactics on the part of the police. They've gone from, last week they were accused of not doing enough to try and stop protesters. Now they've really gone into overdrive. They've locked down much of the centre of the city, closed all the entrances onto the Champs Elysees, and were searching everybody's bags. Thus far this morning they've arrested over 500 people, mostly for the possession of something that could be used as an offensive weapon. Those are things ranging from pétanque balls to hammers that the police say that they've found on protesters. And thus far it does seem to have worked. The protests have been relatively calm, and also the efforts of the authorities to essentially scare people off from demonstrating today by telling them that they expected a hardcore of violent demonstrators does also seem to have dissuaded a lot of people from coming out to march.
And what about the common man in Paris and, say, tourists and others who descend upon the city all the time, and this is, festival time. And how is the situation for those who are visiting Paris?
Well, as you were saying, most tourist attractions are closed. Most museums have shut their doors for the day. Things like the Eiffel Tower are closed, as are most of the shops. Most of them have boarded up, so there won't be very much Christmas shopping taking place in Paris today. A recent poll said that 1 in 4 French people have already cancelled a planned shopping trip because they were worried about the disruption. Because the Yellow Vests, of course, aren't just demonstrating here in Paris. They've also been blockading motorways and roundabouts around the country for the last month. So it does have an impact on the small businesses especially, and shops in what is a crucial period for Christmas trading, of course, normally in the run-up to Christmas. There's also an impact on hotels. Some foreign countries have told their citizens not to visit Paris this weekend, and we spoke to the Hotels Association earlier this week, and they told us they've seen as much as a 40% drop in bookings from what they would usually expect for busy weekends in December.
Alina, one last thing before we let go of you. Talk to us in terms of, if you were to compare this weekend's protests with the previous and the one before that, have they intensified? Have they become bigger? Or the authorities able to control it better this time around?
So as I was saying, because of the much tighter police presence, the demonstration this weekend bears no resemblance to last weekend in the sense that that was extremely violent. We saw lots of protesters throwing paving stones and other objects at the police, who responded with tear gas and rubber bullets. We've heard some reports of violence from the Champs Elysees today, but the dramatic switch that we've seen in police tactics, where they are, as I'm saying, taking no chances at all. They're searching everyone's bags, they're searching cars, they're not hesitating to arrest people, and they have already arrested more people than ever in Paris on a single day, and significantly more people than last week already, and that does seem to be working. It does seem to have dissuaded protesters. They have perhaps managed to catch the worst elements of the troublemakers, so we are seeing fewer yellow vests altogether out demonstrating. The Interior Ministry says there are 31,000 marching all over France, not just in Paris, compared to over 100,000 last Saturday. So the violence does seem to have scared people off. There was a deliberate effort by the Interior Minister to scare people off ahead of this. He did said numerous times on television that they were expecting a hardcore of violent demonstrators and that peaceful protesters should not turn out. And lots of people do seem to have heard that message.